Ingram Smith, Bud Elliott back again for another episode of the Nolecast. So, Bud, good to see you again, my man. It's been quite a while, relatively speaking, as far as in-season length that we've been able to sit down here. Ironically, been about as excited to pod as I could have been for a long time, but had some technical issues with some cords, and same day ship is a challenging thing to get at this point in time. So, nonetheless, good to sit down with you Thursday night. We'll put something out for our listeners to have kind of over the bye weekend, and got a little recruiting talk, some good listener questions, maybe a game or two that we'll point out that you could watch over the weekend with Florida State in the back of your mind. But yeah, cheers, bro. Let's jump into it.
Man, after a win, Florida State is were they 2-0 in the month of October? So undefeated in October. Oh for October in the loss column, maybe. I'll stop now. But I mean they could go about 30, 35 days without losing a game. Is that the longest stretch they've gone without a loss in the season, and how long? Because they lost on 9/25, so 9/26 to 10/29. I mean, we're talking more than a month without suffering a loss.
Yeah, that'll help certainly.
But you can't overlook UMass.
Help you put some, salvage a recruiting class. Hopefully, let you have a little bit of a positive window of time here. So with that, we'll jump into the recruiting subject matter in general with one Mr. Travis Hunter. But before we do that, we'll thank our friends at Louisiana Hot Sauce. 3 simple ingredients, 1 fantastic product, improves all but almost every meal. And we're ever so fortunate to be able to continue to work with them. So, Travis Hunter, the good is that he put out a fairly clear statement tonight saying that he's absolutely committed to Florida State. The bad is that it appears as though there's a second visit to Athens on the docket, which in my opinion is a little, I don't want to say game changer, but when you go and then you reschedule and go again 2 weeks later, that's a significant development in a kid's recruitment. And then it looks like old Kirby dropped in on the helicopter tonight in the Collins Hill North Gwinnett matchup. Hunter isn't playing, but still a fairly significant move by one Mr. Smart there. To be fair, North Gwinnett is a hell of a program in its own right. Josh Downs, the kid from UNC that we were talking about, is a North Gwinnett product. If you've been watching Iowa at all, Tyler Goodson, their super athletic back, is a North Gwinnett. It's one of the more, it's a massive pipeline school with a lot of talent that, despite the names that I just listed, not unfamiliar with that talent making its way to Athens. So not fully there for Travis Hunter, but he's there for Travis Hunter at the same time.
For sure. And yet, Hunter puts out the statement and says, hey, I'm like 100% to Florida State. Don't worry about it. Like normally I would think, hey, worry here. And yet I'm not as worried because like I know who Travis Hunter is, and because of the history of how like he didn't commit to FSU coming off a good year. FSU went 3-6 and they were like a terrible team last year. He committed to what they can be and has continued to recruit guys for this class. And I think just his relationship with Woodson will get this one done for the Noles. But certainly like him taking multiple visits to the number 1 team in the country, it's not a cause for no concern. I'm sure FSU doesn't love it, but also like he's probably the best player in the country at this point. So he has leverage to do really whatever he wants. I also thought it was notable that the guy he recruited to FSU, Sam McCall, also put out that statement that, hey, I'm locked in to Florida State after after a lot of rumors about him having interest from other programs or maybe being interested in other programs. That's really big. Like I think they're going to keep most of the top of this class together. Travion Williams, the defensive end out of Mississippi, they're going to have to find a way to get him back on campus again, I think. Obviously, LSU offers and he goes and immediately visits. Now, I will say, I have bet against LSU. I check my records every single game so far this season, which has worked well. And I am doing so again this weekend. LSU is just not a good team. I actually think right now Florida State would beat LSU on the field. And I don't think I would have said that in the preseason. Um, so if LSU just totally falls apart, which I think there's a real chance they end up 4-6 after 10 games.
Mm-hmm.
Which, hey, FSU might only win 4 games as well this year. Is Trayvon Williams really going to pick there? Maybe one of the Mississippi schools. Maybe he'll stick with his commitment to FSU, even though he told the Clarion Ledger, I believe, what was the paper, right, that he was sort of like re-examining his commitment, I believe was the term. He didn't actually decommit, but he just kind of taking a look at some things. And then Alu Ba is an offensive lineman. They're going to have to try to really keep and fight in the class, as well as Tay Woody, who is another offensive lineman who is committed, but is obviously looking at Auburn. Losses have consequences. And
These are all the kids that we identified a month ago, too. The
yeah,
historical patterns would dictate you're going to have a hard time keeping hold of at least the last 3 names that we talked about. Travis Hunter. So a little bit of a different conversation, but yeah, I mean, this is where we thought it would go. You're right. Losses do have consequences. Great that you went up and really slapped around a decent football team in UNC, although a very curious football team as well. I'll be interested to see what they look like the rest of the way. There's a lot of kind of parallels to the Georgia Tech game and the Florida State game from UNC's perspective, and it kind of came out, looked the better team, sleptwalked through a vast majority of the game, and then could never really get back in it. Odd to have a team that's just that discombobulated, but this isn't the UNC podcast. But as far as trying to get a feel for what you are, it really doesn't matter. You went up, you won, you got to win, desperately needed, and gave yourself a little bit of positive momentum going into this bye week stretch here. But a long-winded way of saying, it's like the Jacksonville State game is almost like water damage in a home or something like that.
Yeah.
Bud. Like it's going to take a second to realize how deep that really went and what the actual repercussions of that. And it's not, and I've said this the whole time, you don't lose to Jacksonville State and somebody tell Josh Newberg that he's decommitting 2 days later or something like this. Is a process that kind of has to work itself out of the system. And I think in the next, 5 to 15 days, we'll get a decent feel as to some of the fallout of what, week 2, week 3, and week 4 meant to this recruiting class.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mentioned the whole month without a loss thing because I'm assuming they're going to beat UMass. That's not a guarantee, but overall, I think it's pretty likely that they beat UMass. UMass is not very good. Going a month without a loss, having the bye week, which means you get to sell this North Carolina win for 2 straight weeks. North Carolina is a school that has recruited very well recently. Even though it hasn't won a whole lot on the field, it did make the Orange Bowl last year. It is certainly a program that the recruits that you're going after are well aware of the trajectory, or at least the perceived trajectory of North Carolina's program, which is like straight up, this season notwithstanding. So going up there and saying, hey, we physically whipped those guys, it certainly helps your program to be able to go and say that. And you get to sell that for 2 weeks, and then you get UMass. And, we talked about the need to get off to a good start because of the potential for a poor finish, and how poor finish might not be that bad because it's right before signing day. Guys don't typically like stick with you, for a month until signing day, and then all of a sudden, ditch. They're going to have some fairly positive vibes to ride here for about a whole month. I mean, like they go to Clemson on 10:30, right? Are they going to win that game? Probably not. I think right now they'd be probably 20-point dogs. So that's bigger than what they were at UNC. Obviously, they beat UNC soundly. So I guess anything could happen. But I do think you have a decent chance of beating UMass and getting one more win. And I honestly think, man, that 5-3 is probably more likely than, or excuse me, I think 5-7 is more likely than 3-9.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
I think it's the storyline for the second half of the season is, can you get to 5, and can a Miami be part of that 5? Because you'll get, you won't replicate what you had at Notre Dame as far as the number of visitors and stuff, but it'll be another platform that you can try to sell the school, and it'll be as good of an atmosphere as there can be for a 3 or 4 loss team in the country. I think people are excited about the idea of beating Miami, and people think you can beat Miami and put an end to kind of this meaningless loss streak that you have to them. Meaningless in the fact that Miami did absolutely nothing with it. But that'll be a last chance for you to really kind of get a pop. And I think if you can win that game, you can probably keep this recruiting class together a little bit more than I would have thought you would, and maybe give yourself to make a couple, solid additions here, whether it be some of these guys that you've been holding on to, or some of the, newer names that might pop up on your board as you're both evaluating kids. And let's be honest with you, at some point you're gonna have to make a decision as to, hey, is this big time national project prospect? Do we think we're really going to be able to sign him? And is the fallout if we don't sign him worth it, rather than go ahead and focusing on maybe an in-state prospect that we're fairly confident we can get in the mix and are, somewhat excited about seeing what he looks like 3 to 4 years down the line when he's properly developed.
Right. I mean, if you want to go high school, and I think
Mhm.
portal will still be an option here. They've had I would say, overall good track record so far of taking portal kids. Now, look, you know who else had a really, really good track record of taking portal kids for several years and was probably the best team in the whole country with portal guys, excluding like the Bamas and Oklahomas who just kind of cherry pick who they want? Miami.
Yeah.
And in this year, the portal kids they took did not really work out as well. So, granted, like you could have your high school kids bust too. That's entirely possible. I talked about that on the show that I cut on, was that Wednesday, I guess, or Tuesday. Days kind of run together. I was doing some work trip stuff. But I think you will probably go portal a little bit this year. But man, like they're going to get on the road this week. They're going to try to get a good feel for where they stand with a lot of these kids in person. Talking to the kid, talking to the coach, all that kind of stuff. Hey, maybe they bump into mom and dad at the game or at the school or wherever, and they kind of get a feel for where they are with some of these guys. I'm sure at IMG, Duffy's probably telling you what he's hearing on Ba. So, that's helpful. Even though I don't think they're visiting IMG this week, but I'm sure they'll get to do that later. Anyway, man, I think they actually have a chance to keep a lot of this together. That North Carolina win is probably pretty big for recruiting, and you said it. Like, think about the losses they've had. They lost to a Notre Dame team, which kind of thereafter got decimated by injuries and still only has one loss. Right? They lost to the Cincinnati team, which very well could be the first Group of 5 school to make the playoff. They lost to Louisville. Who's Louisville lost to? Well, a one-loss SEC team in Ole Miss, and Wake Forest, an undefeated team, and
Right.
then you lost to Wake Forest, an undefeated ACC team. Given your injuries, those losses are, I would say, foreseeable / understandable, even the way that they happened. The Jacksonville State game, like you said, it really stands out. Even with all the injuries, if you just don't, as a coaching staff, screw that game up, right? If you manage to keep your guys focused during the week leading up to the game, you probably make a bowl game. And that's one they're going to have to wear because they're not likely to make a bowl game now. It's not impossible. They would need to get 4 more wins out of their next 7, out of their next 6. Probably not going to happen. I mean, UMass, Clemson, NC State, Miami at BC, at Florida. Probably not.
Who do you think's a more likely win, Bud? Clemson or NC State?
Oh, NC State. Just because I've seen NC State go on the road and lay an egg.
Yeah.
At Mississippi State. I'm not real sure you can block Clemson, right? For all the problems that Clemson has had offensively, and I know they have some guys out on defense.
Yeah, so their defensive line has sustained some injuries. I mean, they're having to hit younger kids in a manner that they
Brazier's
haven't
out for
in a
the
couple
year.
years.
Tyler Davis was out 7 to 8 weeks, and I believe that was on 9/25. So there's probably not going to, probably will not be back by the FSU game. Maybe wrong on that. But Xavier Thomas is playing really well for them now. Actually, pretty happy for that kid to come back from all the stuff he went through, and be able to get back out on the field. That's a game you probably get physically whipped with your offense. Now, your defense may be able to handle them at the point of attack, I guess. And your outside corners have been playing okay recently. So there's some hope there. I thought they did a really nice job in the UNC game, by the way. Like they kind of left those guys on islands at times, and North Carolina did not punish them with their outside dudes. That FSU's guys won those battles.
Yeah.
They'll have to do more of that against Clemson. Probably not leave them on islands. Clemson doesn't really have much of a tight end or a slot threat this year. NC State is probably better along the lines of scrimmage, especially if you look at both lines of scrimmage. But the game's in Doak. I don't know. I think that gap's too big there. I think Clemson is a less likely win for you.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it's a lot closer, to be honest with you. I also think it's a lot closer because you have to play Clemson the week before and then turn around and play NC State a week later. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. 5 would be a hell of a salvage project from where we were on the night of September 11th, talking about a conversation where you lost to Jacksonville State at home. I mean, it would be a hell of a turnaround. And like we said all along, might not be that you knock down, all of the Nigel Kellys, Colemans, Jones Jr., etc., all the kind of absolute cream that is there to add to the class. Although I think you might get, 1 or 2 of those guys from the broader picture. I'm not saying you're going to sign 2 of the 3 that I just talked about. And we'll see. I think you can sell. When we did our season previews, I think our aggregate was around 5.4, 5.5 expected wins. That's a pretty reasonable thought process, at least going into the year. We had no idea about some of the injuries that you'd have and the concentrated injuries you'd have the offensive line in particular. If you somehow manage to win this season with 5 wins, it would be a hell of a process, and I think it would be good enough to keep that class around that you really need to have as kind of the jumping off point of a real turnaround here. So
I agree with you there. Something else we said, and it's something that is worth watching. I went back and I said, hey, if they finish like top 50 in SP Plus, which is a metric that considers quality of play, win or lose, I'm really not going to have any worries about what the record is, because it's going to tell me this thing is moving in the right direction. And look, I have some quibbles with Bill's formula at times, and I talk with him almost daily on GChat, which I guess people call Google Voice Chat or whatever it is now. But like I'm old, so I just say GChat. And I know that some of the stuff that the formula captures is what I consider kind of garbage time based on the decisions that coaches are making, like opposing coaches. But the formula disagrees. And I said if they're top 50, I probably would not have any problems with how the season plays out. They're 55th. They have played a difficult schedule so far. The schedule they've played so far, he ranks as 26th. The schedule they have yet to play, he ranks 10th. So a lot of this is that you're playing a schedule without a lot of breaks on it. And then you also fell into the sewer by just like somebody left the manhole cover open. You just stepped into that one against Jacksonville State. And that really wasn't that fluky. So yeah, this team is better. Like if you told me that they have an actual shot of being like a top 50 quality team after week 2, I'd be like, yeah, right. But they've turned some things around here. Jordan being healthy really helps. I think Maurice Smith being healthy obviously helps. Their depth got really exposed when they had those offensive linemen go out. And things are looking, I would say, mostly better. But I also I don't buy it when Norvell says, hey, this is the new level, right? I told the team it's a restart. We don't turn back from here. That's what he has to tell his team. But as an evaluator, I'm not buying that, right? North Carolina had a lot of stuff go wrong for them that game. FSU took it, made its own opportunities, had a lot of things go right. But also, there will be teams that play you differently, right? You can't assume that Jordan's going to stay this healthy throughout the season, nor with the offensive line. Like, to me, this team has the North Carolina level performance in them, but it still has the Wake Forest level performance in it and the Jacksonville State one maybe less so, but certainly some of those games when you were really not competitive until the opponent called off the dogs. Louisville, games like that. Those games are still very capable of this team. This team is not going to play at this North Carolina level for the rest of the year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I had to chuckle at that because that's the same words that, ironically enough, one Jimbo Fisher
Yes.
delivered in a North Carolina locker room in the kind of the Rod Owens Christian Ponder game where they came back and had
Was
as
that the
brilliant
catch
of
the
a
ball,
second
Bo,
half
where
as you could ever
Coley's
have.
mic'd up in the coach's box and they called the wheel route and you could tell that Bo had dropped it at practice a lot because Coley's like, catch the ball, Bo, catch the ball, Bo.
Yeah, catch
Yeah.
it, Bo.
Yeah.
But that was a great game. But that was literally verbatim, or not verbatim, damn near to verbatim. Jimbo Fisher's in the locker room saying, this is the standard, this is the level. We never go back from this. And unfortunately, it's
What
very
happened there?
rare that teams' progression is, purely linear. So we can try to figure out what we're going to get as far as a team for the rest of the year. One team that we're always fortunate to be able to pair with is Chad and Shannon, great people. 200, I don't know, 200, I guess we're getting close to 225, somewhere in that area. Now listeners have either refied or gotten an original loan from, two of which is my partner in crime here, Mr. Bud Elliott.
You want to give some shout outs? Let's give some shout outs to these people who called 844 FSU Loan. That's 844 FSU Loan. Let's give a shout to Matt and Lynn in Jacksonville, who just closed on what day was this? Closed on Wednesday. Awesome. We got some stuff going out to them. And let's also give a shout out to John, who closed, looked like, on Monday. So awesome. Two more right there. Guys, really appreciate y'all being loyal Nolecast listeners. And again, customer service, great experience, awesome rates. That's what they do. And little Knowles chatter. And gosh, I mean, 2 wins. What a better time to refi.
Yeah. Yeah, take
What year was
advantage.
that?
I'm obviously not an economic expert or anything, but just as a podcaster, I'm telling you, take advantage of interest rates that will not forever be at this level. If you want to look at what Social Security's adjustment for cost of living was last year, it is significant and it's the highest it's been like 5.7%. So what I'm saying, there's some inflationary scares out there. Rates get altered. Take advantage of this window while you can, and there's no better people to take advantage of it with than Chad and Shannon.
Did you see what Ethereum did today?
No, I did not.
With like 7%.
There you go. There you go. Well, credit to you,
So
sir.
yeah, so what happened in that Jimbo game? After that game, do you remember?
The next week? No, I do not.
Well, they actually ended up they beat North Carolina State 45-42.
Okay.
I do remember that. That was 2009, right?
Believe so.
Or
Yeah.
was it 20? Because they didn't go there in 2010.
Yeah. No, I'm almost. Yeah, I believe it was 2009.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Rod Owens, the 9 catches for 199 yards. Then the next week they go and lose at Clemson 40-24. And then they need the Burt Reed punt return to beat Maryland. And then they go and they lose in the swamp 37-10. So indeed, they did not play at that level for the rest of the year. Teams are almost certainly not their best level or their worst level for the most part. Hell, look at A&M, right? They just beat Alabama.
Hmm.
They also played 3 straight terrible games, Colorado, Arkansas, and Mississippi State. What is the true level? It's probably somewhere in between. They could lose, probably won't, but they could lose this weekend at Missouri. Just something to think about with that level. Like, let's not make the mistake of thinking, well, I will say, I thought about this. When they lost Jacksonville State, I was like, they might not win a game. You know what I mean? We didn't know what direction the team would take emotionally. And to me, the most recent data point is the one that matters the most, right? But it doesn't matter to the exclusion of all other data points. Like, they're still the team that almost lost to Syracuse and the team that, really was not very competitive with Louisville until second half. And they're the team that was not competitive at all against Wake Forest. I mean, well, some penalties and stuff, but I think this being the most recent game does help for sure. And anyway, By the way, Conley gives them a 14% chance of making a bowl. FPI 6% chance. So
You and I were about 5% pre UNC game, so yeah, I probably just shade under where Bill is on that at this point. So
you're going to need help though, like from some of these other teams on the schedule.
certainly, yeah, it'd be horrible if Florida just completely unwound and was a shell of a program by the end of the year. But that's to be an awful lot of help for that to happen. So we talked a little bit about the fact that there'd be some evaluations and new offers going out, but we're always fortunate enough to be able to, fall back on your duties with 247 and the fact that you get to see so many of these kids out in person. Florida State recently offered defensive lineman Eddie Kelly, somebody that I know you've been able to see once or twice before. Let's get your firsthand perspective on the type of prospect that Kelly is.
Yeah, so Eddie Kelly is actually listed as a tight end. He plays for West Orange there in Winter Garden. I believe he was at Jones prior. I saw him at a 7-on, which was actually, I think it was actually at Jones High School over the summer. Anyway, like FSU likes him as a defensive end. He was playing tight end, and I'm going to go and find what I wrote about him here. It was not over the summer, by the way. It was actually the one in January, unless this is hold on. Oh, this is Pylon. No, so I've seen Eddie Kelly twice then. All right. Orlando Jones receiver or tight end prospect Eddie Kelly is a name to watch. Kelly recently picked up an offer from USF and showed why on Saturday. The 6'5", 210-pounder was able to use his length to go over defenders and also shield them from the ball. Kelly could be a fast riser. He also has some nastiness to him, not seen in players with a basketball build. This is backed up by the blocking on his huddle. So FSU actually seems to like him as a defensive player here. But that's pretty impressive. I remember thinking he was actually thicker than 210 when I saw him the second time.
Yeah, this bio list him at the article listed 262. His bio has him at 265. So
yeah, 210 is definitely not not at all.
Okay.
262 feels big, but still. Where else do we see him? I was definitely at the one at Jones High School because I remember Ivins was there as well, taking a look at him. Sorry, here I'm trying to scroll. Pylon. Okay. Here we go. So Ivins actually wrote this for the Pylon in April. He wrote, Kelly was a big reason why Team CD went undefeated during pool play as a frequent target for quarterback Davin Widener. The soon-to-be senior Orlando Jones spent much of his past fall working as inline tight end, which is pretty rare to see these days. Kelly isn't the most dynamic of athletes, but he's a crafty route runner equipped with some soft hands on a rather large frame. He lists himself now at 6'5", 235. A fair player comparison for Kelly might be the current Illinois starting tight end Daniel Barker, as Kelly looks and moves a lot like Barker did on the 7-on-7 circuit. Anyway,
I see he's got the Jonathan Kando play down pat. He's going to be great at that.
Yeah.
Defensive line then that just puts hands on the ball. The old rare pick six from a defensive end.
The thing that stands out to me in what I wrote though is the physicality, right? And the nastiness could be, could be worth it.
Keep an eye on it. Just a new offer there, something to keep in the back of your mind. And like you said, probably won't be the first of these kind of newer offers as Florida State tries to get a feel for what else is out there. And as always, everything's made a little bit more complicated by the fact that, is this high school kid worth offering, or are you better just keeping the spot in the back of your pocket and working the portal yet again? So, but when we get to our listener questions here, we'll try to get through these pretty quickly. We can always keep one or two in our own back pocket. as we've got some bye week content still left here to fill. But Michael asks the first question tonight. Michael says, is the risk of another coaching change at defense coordinator too much? Should Florida State wait and see if Fuller improves? How much of the bad is tied to personnel that would also have to carry over to the next guy?
Well, I don't think too much. If this defense doesn't improve a whole lot, I think you need to make a move. And it's 71st right now in the country in SP plus. I don't think it's much higher than that in FPI. You have legitimate talent, in my opinion, on this defense. Now you do have some holes, most notably linebacker, and safety is not great. But I think this defense should be better than it's been personally. So unless it improves a whole lot, my opinion is I think they should make a change.
Yeah.
And I'm not worried about the scheme continuity stuff. You got to get the position right. You're not winning a damn thing next year anyway.
Yeah. I think the TBD here. I think this will continue to play out, and this will resolve itself on the field. If you stay kind of where you have been, then you'll be having a new defense coordinator and maybe a couple other new spots on that defensive staff. I will say the defensive backs gotten better. Looks like there's it's certainly a more coordinated and well-rounded defense, but we're making some extrapolations based off one game and in season, in season judging people of jobs tends to swing way too mightily from week to week as to where you feel guys are, unless they're just doing a absolutely pathetic job. And Fuller's had his frustrations, certainly, but I would certainly not label him as a pathetic, has not been a pathetic failure by any means, absent maybe one game and one call in particular. TJ has our second question here. Hypothetically speaking, if Fuller is gone at the end of the year, and Diaz gets fired in Miami, would he be a good fit for defense coordinator here? He's alma mater and former GA. It sounds unlikely, but good to get all opinions out on the table. Thanks, guys, for the content.
Well, I don't really think so. He does have a solid track record at some stops as a defensive coordinator and is a good recruiter, but I don't think that's really a move that Norvell would make. I don't know if those two know each other though, so I don't want to speak out of school and say with certainty that it wouldn't. The thing is, like, if they make the move, they're going to have to probably overpay for the next guy because Norvell is going to be 3-6 and let's say 4-8. So he'll be 7-14 after 2 years. The coaching community is not going to see that as a guy who's going to be at FSU for the long term, even if he tells them, hey, like the guy who we think is going to be the new AD, I'm pretty tight with them, and they understand this is a long-term rebuild because of the decision they made with Willie. They screwed up the roster. So they're probably going to have to overpay somewhat, and they were probably not going to be able to get somebody who is like a really, really well-known name. Like, I don't think they're going to be able to get like a Dan Lanning or somebody like that from Georgia.
No. I mean, you'll have to, like Newberg threw out the name Kevin Steele a couple weeks ago. I don't know if that was just
random
random, but he will. That's who you're going to have to go see. Get somebody like that. You're going to have to go get somebody that's a veteran journeyman who, if he gets fired next year, just kind of laughs it off, appreciates a big check, says that he's got a couple new coaches polo, in his outfit wardrobe now, and moves on down the road. You're not going to get a young guy. You're not going to get an up and comer.
You make it a young guy if he's not proven.
Well, you're not going to get a young guy who's not a high risk young guy.
This is not a name that I think Norvell has any attachment to, at least not to my knowledge. But he's off the Saban tree, so there's a likelihood that he's a Sexton client, which obviously is going to play into this. I don't think there's any way that Norvell is going to hire a D coordinator who's not a Sexton client, just given how these things kind of work. Maybe he will, but we'll see. He's not hadn't even fired Fuller yet, but like Doug Belk is doing really nice things with that Houston defense so far. Could be a name. Young guy, definitely understands schemes, seems to be a good teacher, has shown he can work for Dana Holgerson. So that's always interesting. You could get a young guy from the G5 who has done a good job, I think.
You'll
but
get a
you're
very
probably
high
not going to
risk
get.
young guy if you get one. It won't be
Yeah.
a one of these uh, more clear up and comers. I'll put it that way. It'll be somebody like I'm not saying that they'll be involved in this name, but it'll be somebody like when Jimbo hired Jeremy Pruitt, some guy that's very much looking to get a defense to make his own and doesn't otherwise have all that much of a track record behind him. So
Maybe a Jim Leonard type. Not saying Jim Leonard, but like Jim Leonard was not very proven when Wisconsin hired him to be their defensive coordinator. They
mhm.
thought he had really good coaching chops, but you know, um,
Before we get to Dominic, we'll thank our good friends at Congruity. Congruity is experiencing your business optimized, and it has been a great fit for us. It's been a great fit for some of our friends who have also chosen to pair with them, whether it be payroll assistants, HR, whatever it can be. They are a great person to partner with, or a great group to partner with. And Matt Lewis is a great person to partner with and explore how you can get the most out of your business and explore what the best relationship there could be. Matt's been great to us and been great for us. We would encourage you to reach out to him, Knowles at congruityhr.com via email. Like I've said previously, I think 80% of the people that have ended up being Congruity clients have reached out to me first to kind of put the two parties together. And if you'd prefer to do that, feel free to hit me up on Twitter, Gmail, email, wherever it may be. But Congruity HR, great benefit for us, and we are pretty confident they would have all kinds of positive benefits to you and your business as well. Reach out to them, spend 5 minutes talking about Florida State ball with Matt, and explore as to whether or not they would be a good fit for you.
all right. So where do you want to go now?
So Dominic asked a few podcasts ago, you guys mentioned that Florida State can benefit from LSU having a down year. I'm from Louisiana and really curious if you guys could expand on that. Are there any type of top recruits that Florida State in Louisiana that Florida State feels it could go after? This Cajun Noel truly appreciates the Nolecast and the great insight y'all produce. Thanks and keep up the great work. So thank you for the kind words, Dominic. Bud.
Yeah, actually, there's a couple. So Kendrick Law would be one from inside the state of Louisiana. Although I will say, like, for the most part, Louisiana folks still think they're going to keep their Louisiana kids in state, even if they have a coaching change. Um, Now, I think the bigger impact here could be the guys that FSU is competing against LSU for, or already lost out to LSU on. For instance, linebacker Demario Tolan, Kissimmee kid. If LSU keeps losing games here, I mean, it's not crazy to think LSU might end up being like 3-7 by Thanksgiving. They do have ULM, so they'll get that win, and then they got to finish with A&M, and who knows what A&M will be? They might end up being good. They might end up being kind of Um, what about Julian Armella? Somebody who you and I and everybody else thought is probably not a take at like a Clemson, Bama, Ohio State, but LSU is legitimate competition for. Certainly, that's a guy. And then we already mentioned on the show tonight, Travion Williams, right, who took a visit down there to LSU, but now LSU just looks like their program is, I don't say their program, their team is kind of collapsing. And I definitely expect Orgeron to get fired. So, um, just some things to think about right there.
Andy says, would you rather have Jordan Travis on the 2012 team or EJ on the 2021 team? Which one is a better hunting dog? Yeah, I would. I don't know that EJ would. Certainly, if you got end of career EJ who started to see ghost and would fall into that spin move a little too easily, that he would pair real well with what this offensive line has been for the vast majority of the year. And Jordan on that 2012 team would have been. Yeah, it would be interesting to see what Jimbo would have done with somebody like Jordan and how much he would have really run on him, because I certainly felt comfortable doing that in some of the early Jimbo years and seemed like you got away from it maybe in the back half of the Jimbo Fisher era.
I would agree with that. So I don't know though, man. Like, do you think Jordan would have worked on the 2012 team with how he throws the ball? Maybe I don't know. I'm kind of partial to EJ here, but I think your point about the late career EJ is a really good one. That's a good question. That's a really good question.
It is. It is. It would have been interesting to see what Jordan is benefiting from good, solid coaching right now. Would be curious to see how Jordan would have developed under, a little bit more continuity of what the message was during the first couple years of his college trajectory, as he certainly bounced around a little bit. And fortunate enough for Florida State, he did and landed in Tallahassee. Mason says, overall review of the program. How has Norvell changed things for the better since taking the job? Are there things off the field he can continue to improve? Second part of this question is, since Florida State's hired a Harvard academic as their new president, what should that tell us about the overall big picture for the program and search for a new athletic director?
You want to take this one first?
Yeah. I mean, what's he done? How's Norvell changed the program for the better? I mean, certainly and I think this is both Norvell and the boosters realizing that you have to heavily invest in the infrastructure and kind of the bones of the project. But Norvell, we've talked about things being, when we compared the differences of the Willie era and the Norvell era, we just said that there was a broader foundation, a stronger foundation, kind of a better infrastructure within the program, both in that there's a better support team around Mike, and I would say there's more consistent leadership from the top down, and that helps kind of everybody else fill into their roles in a better manner. So I'm not saying that everybody in the programs over there holding hands and doing perfect every day, or that there's not things that they can improve upon, or individuals that they could probably make a slight improvements over. But for the most part, everybody's kind of swimming in the same direction in that building, and there is the noticeable the noticeable identification of an entity that has some leadership behind it, and that's brought on by Norvell and his chief of staff and kind of everybody else that operates within that building. So
I'm not saying that everybody that Norvell has brought on is, professional or is like definitely FSU quality. But I do think that, especially in the back of the house staff, that his hit rate, as far as people who you think, okay, like that's somebody that is like a upper Power 5 quality, director of player personnel or development or whatever, is a little bit higher standard than what they had under Willie. I've said this a couple times. I think a lot of those guys that Willie brought with him and girls should have been cut loose a stop or two before he got to Tallahassee. And I think that was part of his downfall, right? Because those are the people that a lot of the power people behind the scenes had to deal with and had to see how they operated, and just wasn't, they didn't feel like they were, FSU quality as far as their work product and their organization. So
as far as the president, I mean, look, you don't come to Florida State and not realize that the athletic programs and the football program in particular is a thing of massive importance, both to the alumni and very much kind of the university's front porch, so to say. So I'm going to be a broken record here and say that you need to make a decision on an athletic director, and you need to do it sooner than later. And I know there's some complicating things behind the scenes. We acknowledge this every time we talk about it. You need to get your 4 to 5 year interim into a new position. Okay, do it. But Florida State is a school that has built its brand and is known, thanks in a large part to athletics. And the fact that this school has not had a athletic director in however many 1,300, 1,400 days, I gave the stat a couple shows ago, and hasn't had a real, I would say, bona fide, legitimate athletic director who was able to play that role behind the scenes since 2008 is a problem, and one that needs to be resolved and, remedied sooner than later.
So, can I throw a little curveball here to you?
Please.
If you're Mike Norvell, do you actually want them to get Alford in right now, or would you rather have them get Alford in later? You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, a little bit. I do. I
Do you think the audience does, or should we expand on it?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting theory, an interesting idea here. if you're Mike Norvell, I think you would want to see an athletic director, and the part of you that would want to see an athletic director sooner than later is you want the commitment from the university. You want clarity as to what you're doing. You want a clear piece of evidence that this this school values athletics and is going to have a clear cut idea as to where they want to go and who they want to go there with. Maybe you can give your theory as to why it might be slightly beneficial if this process doesn't continue to slow play itself.
Sure. So, I mean, given the talent that the defense is losing this year, right? And the fact that, like, I don't know when you're going to have a good throwing game here, probably a couple years. I mean, Duffy's coming as a true freshman. We'll see what you get out of Purdy. Not really expecting Travis to be a good thrower of the ball anytime soon. You know, if Alford was in tomorrow, how many years does Norvell get to rebuild this thing? You know, if he doesn't get in until like midway through next year, then it's actually conceivable that Norvell could get 2 more years under Alford, right? Eventually, an AD does feel pressure to put his own stamp on the program. And just, I don't know, just something I'm thinking, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't think Mike Alford will be here without being the athletic director to some
like by the
point in
summer, you mean?
time. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how long this kind of situation can play itself out. So, um, just something to watch. So, I mean, we've made our opinions pretty clear on this subject matter, or at least I have, and it'd be interesting to see how it plays out. I will reiterate that if you lose Mike Alford, it's not as though you're going to lose every booster in the world or something like that, but you're going to have some real relationships that have to be repaired with some of the people who have uh, bought into his leadership vision and very much believe him to be a guy that can lead the university athletically for a period of time moving forward. Final questions of the night come from Matt. Matt says, Jermaine Johnson has been a huge asset to this team. How does his production rank to this point in the season versus some of the other great Florida State pass rushers, defensive linemen? Yeah. I mean, we can go. I probably should have had these stats pulled previously. I feel like Johnson is certainly the best player they've had since Burns. Johnson is maybe a little bit more consistent version than Burns. That's not a knock on Burns. I mean, look, the guy's got such an elite level takeoff that he's turned into a hell of a player in the NFL. But Burns would either sack you or not be involved in the play for the most part. Johnson, much better against the run. And has just blossomed into one of the nation's better defensive linemen. Obviously, it'll be a great selling point for Florida State in the portal to be able to point to something like this and maybe have a kid that's drafted in the back half of the first round. But bringing number 11 to Tallahassee could not have paid richer dividends than it has so far for you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I obviously I think Burns is a better pro prospect because of the get off, right? Like that's the elite tool. I don't think Johnson has that same level of tools for the pros. I mean, that's why Burns in the first round, makes sense. I don't know about Johnson. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. That's still incredibly impressive, right? To go from being a backup at Georgia to blossoming elsewhere. I mean, 6.5 sacks is really, really nice. Sack percentage of 3.8 is fairly high. The other thing, it's just, man, his dependability and being on the field is so important. I mean, he has played like 300 snaps this year. He's given you over 50 snaps, or not over, about 50 snaps a game. That's huge, man. Like he's in there a ton. I hope he doesn't wear down in the second half of the season. They've been trying to rotate more guys in, Fuller, McClendon, Cushney, those type of dudes. But like he's been extremely, extremely good. Now, does he match up to the all-time greats? No, I don't think so. But
Tough thing to ask of anybody at Florida State when you're comparing that position group. But
here's a name I would actually compare him to a little bit. And I think he's a better player than this guy. So don't take this the wrong way. But they were both on bad teams, right? And they didn't get a ton of opportunity to rush the quarterback because a lot of teams just wanted to run the ball against them, and they didn't have the lead very much. Everett Brown. Guy was a pretty good college pass rusher, not nearly as good against the run as Johnson was, and physically not the same level of pro prospect. From a production standpoint, though, Didn't Brown have a ton of sacks to start off 2009, I think, or 2008?
Yeah, ton of sacks. And wasn't he taken with like the first pick of the second round or some first two or three picks of the second round? So
Let me
kid
see
who was
here.
kind of in
Yeah,
that
yeah, he was a second round pick, 43rd overall in the draft.
43rd. Okay, I thought the
Good memory, dude.
Panthers moved a little further up in the second round to draft him, but yeah, I mean that's kind of the window. I mean, right now I think Jermaine would go somewhere between 25 and 45
It'll depend on
in
what
the
he
draft.
runs. If he goes up there and rips a ridiculous time, I mean,
Yeah,
I will say, like, I know Everett Brown, and like I've stood next to him in person. I've stood next to Jermaine in person, obviously, and interviewed both of those guys. Jermaine Johnson is a lot taller than Everett Brown was. I mean, probably, I would say that confidently 3 inches taller
okay.
than Brown. I know Brown at the combine measured 6'1", 263. I
Hmm.
think Johnson, like, legitimately might measure 6'4"
Mm-hmm.
at the combine, which is tough to do. So, wow, I didn't know Brown lasted until 2015 in the league.
He was around for a little while there, certainly, and good for him. Decent guy by everybody that I have known to know him. So the next question was the rushing production. So through 5 games, Jay Sean has 556 yards and Trayshawn has 362. Uh, if you look at Florida State's single season rushing, now nobody's going to touch Dalvin at 1760 or 1690, respectively. But if Jay Sean Corbin kind of stays on this clip, could you see him land somewhere around 8, 9, or 10, possibly? Cam Akers is your 10th most prolific rusher in a single season at 1,024. The man himself, Warwick Dunn, in his he owns 3 of the 9 best single season rushing records in Florida State history. Good for you, Warwick Dunn. So 8 is Larry Key at 1,117, Warwick at 9 at 1,026, and Cam is at 1,024. In theory, could you see Jay Sean Corbin land somewhere around there? Yeah, possibly. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how many carries Ward eats up, as he's wildly talented back in his own right. But Corbin's having a pretty special season so far.
Absolutely, man. Like, that makes sense to me. He is. Ward's playing extremely well for them, obviously. How many? Here's a
Do
question
I
for you,
think
though.
they get to 1,000? No, I think Jay Sean probably gets to around 900 or something like that. I mean, certainly the teams that you're playing are better, and it'll be somewhat dependent as to college football's interesting thing to try to predict now, Bud, because predicting games like 8 through 11, how do you do it? I mean, you don't
Yeah.
know where team's mental headspace is going to be if kids enter into the portal. It's just really hard to predict this team in general, but particularly hard to get a grasp on what some of these teams will look like as you enter into your back third of the season.
Here's the other thing that matters here. Mackenzie Milton so far this year has thrown 93 passes. That is eaten in to how many snaps Jordan Travis has taken.
Mm-hmm.
As Jordan Travis takes more snaps, this passing game sucks. I mean, it is really bad. They are 107th in passing success rate, 103rd in passing explosiveness, 111th in marginal efficiency on the passing side, 119th in adjusted net yards per attempt. I mean, that's both Milton and Travis. Like, both their passing has been terrible this year. Part of that's the receivers as well. And we've well chronicled the offensive line and some of its protection issues. But as you play Jordan Travis more, the yards per game, I think, for Corbin and Ward will probably go down, even though she's going to be running the ball more, because Travis is also going to be running the football.
Right.
Now, their efficiency might increase because teams have to account for Travis's legs more in the run game. But I agree. There are 6 games left. Corbin would need what? 444 to get there, and Ward would need, 670. Or no, Ward would need 638. I don't think either of them get to 1,000, but it's not impossible. Like, this is not a Looney Tunes number. It's actually a decent number to ponder.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that will be it. We will have a bye-week show. We're gonna do a check-in on the old snap count draft, see where we are 6 games through. Next week, have a couple other questions that we're gonna frame. Have kind of a continued year in review conversation. As always, just want to thank you guys for the support that you've given the show. We'll thank our producer, some of the guys who work on a graphics. Always want to tip our hat to the good people at For the Table. But for now, this has been the Nolecast. Thank you so much for your listenership, bud. Great to be back with you and do one of these. And we'll look forward to getting a podcast out to you next week. And then we'll get back into the flow of our in-season schedule here. So 5 stars wherever you get us via your subs, your podcast provider, sub on YouTube if that is of interest to you. And till next time, this has been the Nolecast.